Um, I'll be entertaining a motion, if possible, to move the new business of the vote to go ahead of the old business. We'll have the approval of minutes. Peggy has been kind enough to join us. We're going to let her go during public comments, and she's got a couple slides to share with us that she presented to Deep, just to kind of set some context. And then we'll go into some comments, director's report. Hopefully take that vote on the agenda before we get started, and then new business. And then if no public comments, we'll adjourn. So with that said, before we get into the agenda, the chair would entertain a motion to move the new business topic to go ahead of old business, just to make sure we have enough time to have discussion on the beach and rec. If there's no motion, we'll keep it as is. Hearing no motion, we will keep the vote on new business for after old business. Next item agenda is approval of minutes from last week. We'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
I'll second that.
So a motion, okay. So any discussion or changes on the minutes? Kristen, I have one item on page 2 under old business. If I can just get confirmation from Scott. It says, Scott added that the commission has not increased prices in quite a number of years. Was it 2010? I think we had the definitive year.
2007, I believe.
2007, MP?
I think so.
2007.
7, okay. So if we can just add to that, Kristen, Scott added that the commission has not increased prices since 2007. Any other changes? If that addendum is okay, we'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 3. Okay. Minutes approved. So we'll move on and we'll move over to public comments. At this time, I'll hand it over to the first select woman. Peggy has got some slides for us and just kind of set up some context for the basis for our discussion this evening. So Peggy, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, basically, we've had a couple of, the loud noise behind there. We've had a couple of meetings with the folks at Deep starting last spring and talk about Hammonasset and some of the issues that we were encountering. A lot of the discussions over the summer focused on, COVID related things, capacity issues. But we agreed to start a conversation prior to this next summer to look at more proactive measures that we could take to work with the Hammonasset folks to make sure that we are planning for high volume again, doing any kind of mitigation strategies to try to reduce the impact on the town. And so we had the meeting on Monday with the Deputy Deep Commissioner, both Senator Cohen and Representative Parker joined the call. It included Chief Drum, Ryan Duquesne from the chair of the EDC, and Dave Anderson. And I gave like a presentation, basically trying to give them our perspective of so I'll go through this pretty quickly. But it basically talked about the impact that, the park has on our town. And then it went through and kind of suggested some possible ways that we can work with Deep. Okay. Oh, good. This is always a pain in the butt. How do you get rid of the, I got to slideshow. Okay. All right. There we go. And so this was what I presented to on the call on Monday. Rob had seen an earlier draft of this, and Scott was involved in this also in terms of pulling information together. And basically, we just talked about that we kind of had the same goals. We both want to provide a high quality beach experience to people, and that the town, even pre-COVID, had seen a significant increase in traffic volume and everything. All the things that we know happened when they went to the Passport to Park program. And then obviously COVID it kind of supercharged all of that with the strict capacity restrictions. And what I will say is that we learned from them that they're still planning for the worst and that they're likely to have capacity and restrictions this summer. So that's operationally what they're going to be planning for still. We don't know the numbers or the details. They're spending March putting their plan together. But I was warned that to not assume it's going to be business as usual this summer, that it's actually going to be more, there's likely to be some sort of restriction. So and I just talked about what our assets are. And I talked about the parking and everything at the different facilities, how many beach passes we sell. So it shows that, hey, we're selling all these beach passes and look at how many parking spots we have, traffic burdens. And I can send this out to your commission later if you want to see it. And then actually the chief pulled together some great statistics about the public safety impact and how many calls that we get, not just inside the park, but also adjacent to the park and along the shoreline roads. And that it has a big impact on our volunteer fire departments, which we are volunteer, we're not municipal, our ambulance service and our police department. I went through actually and highlighted some budget numbers that talked about overtime expenses, subsidizing ambulance more and more every year because of the number of calls, not just because of Hammonasset, but generally. And, it does impact our budget every year. We even kind of added an additional officer partly because of some of the demands on our staff during the summer season, and that we make additional capital investments too, specialty equipment that can serve people who are at Hammonasset. So I was trying to just lay that we're not just whining about a lot of traffic, this is having an actual big operational and financial impact on our budget. And so then we kind of brainstormed internally and came up with some possible solutions. And that included a range of things. And we didn't really, some of these are going to require funding, some of them wouldn't, but we were just throwing stuff out there to say, like, let's come up with some creative ideas. One of the things is just actually having a memorandum of understanding with the state, which other states do this with their communities that have parks in them. So it kind of lays out, much more structured way of communication channels and expectations. We talked about more park staffing, better communication, medical. Is there a way they used to, I guess, historically, they had an EMT stationed in the park, and all this stuff has just gotten pulled over the years. And that might help us in terms of some of our, public safety calls. We talked about better management using state police at times, because both the connector, 95 and Route 1 are all state roads, and yet our police are the ones that are dealing with all this in terms of traffic control and management. And then one idea we talked a bit about was this new parking options, and maybe creating some sort of shuttle service from the train station, either in Madison or possibly in Clinton, to Hammonasset. So kind of opening up opportunities for people who don't own cars. It keeps traffic off the roads. And it just creates a nice welcoming experience for people coming to town that want to go to Hammonasset, and they can use the train rather than driving. And so we kind of there's some other ideas around that, possibly using some other land around Hammonasset as overflow parking. And then we talked a lot about Salt Meadow, which the problem with Salt Meadow is, it acts as overflow parking for Hammonasset when they get full. But it actually creates a safer alternative than just closing down the parking and restricting parking there, because then you don't have people on the roads, or you don't have people looking for other beach opportunities. So we had a discussion about this, about how do we improve the situation at Salt Meadow and get some more resources to help us manage some of the parking situations there, including maybe allowing us to charge for parking there, and that way we kind of at least can offset some of the costs that we're incurring for that park being used as overflow parking. So this was kind of the outside the park options. And then we just talked some general things about sharing public safety expenses, and having them just subcontract directly or reimbursing the town when we have calls to the park. And then just some other ideas about, having people to buy advance passes in advance, so that at least we could be more, we could predict more what the visitor volume is going to be. So it's kind of, it was a very good discussion. I think they were extremely appreciative that we took the initiative to present ideas and explained our perspective. No one other town that they had spoken to had done anything like that. They requested that we come back with a prioritization of that list of ideas. So we're going to talk next week about that. I'll be honest, that the story that we heard from them is, budget, limited resources, limited funding. But I think that there was an openness, and I think my understanding is they are really pushing for some more public safety resources, at least within the park, that might help a little bit. And then some of the stuff wouldn't cost money. It's just figuring out another way to direct people so that it's just not a congested mess, and that they don't spill into our beaches all the time. So there'll be more to come on that. Like I said, we've had 2 or 3 calls since I've been elected with Deep. And then I sent a long letter to the commissioner this summer when things got really bad. And then this was, much more proactive attempt now to get some sort of just working collaboratively, with them rather than reactively. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some progress, and we'll just have to follow up with them. But the takeaway was that, they think that there's still going to be some sort of restrictions on capacity. So that doesn't bode well for us. And they feel that May is going to be a very active month. So I know one of the things Rob and Scott and I have talked about is needing to have possible staffing on the gates on the weekends in May, which we normally have not done that. We did it last year in extraordinary circumstances, but Scott's prepared some estimates about, staffing those gates, because I think we might need them on the weekends just because it's going to be busy. It's going to be really busy. So that was kind of that. I'm happy to take some questions, and then unfortunately I do have to hop off. This is one of my few nights I don't have like a 2-hour meeting that I have to be at tonight. So I was hoping to have dinner with my family. But if there's any questions, I can answer them. And like I said, I think there'll be more follow-up with this. So.
Thanks, Peggy. Any questions? Okay. The reason to invite Peggy to give this update was helpful. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Kind of trying to speak.
Yeah. No, I had a question about, so did you talk at all about how transportation would be provided? Is this something that the state would do if they were using the train station, or did you get that far in your discussion?
We didn't. Our thought was maybe Ninetown Transit, that type of service. I mean, we certainly, that's going to be a longer term solution, to be honest. I don't know if that's something that could be activated this summer. We talked about, the state funding a purchase of a vehicle, like an electric vehicle, to go back and forth. I think I think it's a great idea personally, because I know like Clinton runs a trolley that, I don't know recently, but they had in the past that hit like the outlet mall downtown, so if we could kind of create some sort of, type of corridor that would work, that would include Hammonasset, I think that could be a really attractive thing. I just don't know if it's something we would get implemented by the summer. So
My question about the transit, we were talking about the town beaches, but if the state is restricting, are they counting just the cars, or are they counting the people?
Well, I think that, my understanding, it was not a scientific process that they went through.
Okay.
And I think they would look at and assess the parking lots. They didn't actually vehicle count, which I was kind of stunned. At least that's what we were told last summer.
Okay.
And then they also would do observational, just looking at the beaches. So it was really more of a judgment call, I think, than based on any kind of, our system, I think, was actually much better in terms of counting people walking in. And,
yep.
So this is going to be interesting. I think that I don't think we're going to be expecting to limit parking capacity or visitor capacity on our beaches. And we will be much more constrained because there's not going to be a public health emergency or executive orders to do this under. So that's why I was kind of surprised to hear that they would do that. Now they could just do a policy where they're going to close half their parking spots. You know, and I guess we could arguably do the same thing. So I think as we learn more about what their plans are going to be, and they're planning for the month of March, and so we're going to be having a follow-up discussion with them in April, we'll have a better handle on that pre-peak season. But I was kind of surprised that they're planning that. You know, that's going to, they were at like 30% for most of the summer. So maybe they're going to reduce it to 75% or something, just close one lot. I don't know. And they're opening those campgrounds. So that means the test site's going to have to be cleared out of there. Now, if the governor changes his travel requirement for testing, you know, in his orders, which supposedly he's going to be making some changes here at the end of this week, that might reduce the demand for testing as well. So arguably some of these test sites might disappear. And my understanding is they're planning on using the full park this year. And so that test site, that COVID testing site is going to be going away. So lots of unknowns, but you know, we're working it. So any other questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, I know you guys are talking about a lot of things that I'm sure there'll be further discussion on, but so I'm sorry I can't stay for your meeting, but you know, I'll try to join maybe next month and I'll have some more updates maybe from the Hammonasset folks. Okay.
Thanks, Peg.
Thanks, Peggy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peggy.
Bye-bye.
So I don't know if anyone else has joined as attendees. I don't know.
Nope, we
Danielle,
don't
if
have
you can
any.
tell us.
There's no
Okay.
one in the.
Great, thank you. So with no other public comments, we'll transition to a couple brief comments. So I just want to at the outset thank Vince and Pam for really trying to gather some discussion points for us to have. We're not going to solve it all tonight. It's really a continuation of discussion. I wanted to mention the why we're doing this. I think you just heard from Peggy. I think she set it up. There is no planned executive order, and based on the current state of COVID and what we just heard on Hammonasset and what our needs will be. Some other things that have come up in discussions have been the future of the shared economy or the peer-to-peer rentals, also known as Airbnb. We've got a number of new residents that have moved to Madison, not necessarily in population size, but you know, there's a fair amount of people that are new to the town. This will be their first or second beach season. And then just overall, you know, the request of the selectmen, the board of selectmen, the first select woman, asking us to be proactive around, you know, let's look at this more than fees. You know, are there other things that we need to address? And I think last month, you know, we've made some choices around not increasing some of the seasonal beach fees outside of boats and such. But this would be the time to be having some discussion a little bit more in depth on, you know, what's possible. So for tonight's discussion, it's more of a brainstorming. It's some guidance on what we can talk about, and just to try and pull from the group, you know, do we need to be talking about this? I don't think any of us want to be surprised. Pam provided 2 articles that have been, one in the New Haven Register. I'm not sure where the other one was from, but you know, this is a topic and will continue to be a topic. And I think all of us here were on the commission when there was a lot of pushback just on our process, let alone fees. And we kind of owe it to the community to make sure we've done our due diligence. So that's the reason for the discussion tonight, and a continuation of that discussion. So those are my comments. I do want to make mention also that we have had some feedback on the minutes, and I want to let you know that Kristen is committed. She understands the 7 days, and there was a technology gap that I think she's worked through. And I want everyone to know that the minutes have been submitted within 7 days. The request was to make sure the commission members get it. So I think we'll be in good shape there. Nancy, the town clerk, did give me some feedback, and I will refer or defer to MP. Minutes need to be on file 7 days after the meeting. And it is technically a courtesy to have those minutes published. It doesn't mean people can't have access to them. And they can be on file through a website, but that's a courtesy, and that's the town's clerk's office. Let me check in, MP. Am I on base with that, or is that different than you understand?
It is a courtesy to post them on the website, and the posting on the website is outside of the purview of the town clerk's office. We don't have anything to do with where it is or the timing of it or anything like that. The only
So that would be on us to do it.
No, not us as a commission. No, that's the webmaster and whoever is in charge. It's Rita or Lauren possibly. It's whoever.
Okay.
That's somebody else's job. That is not the responsibility of the minute taker.
Right. But I just want to make sure people have what was explained to me. So thank you for that clarification. I think the other question that came up was the Zoom meetings. I think Zoom has a policy that they can keep recordings for 6 months. And on top of that, once the minutes are submitted and approved, there's no need to keep the Zoom meeting up there. And that came from Nancy as well. So I think we're in good shape moving forward, and I just want to make sure everyone understood that. Any other comments or questions on that?
I just want to add that if anybody is, watching this meeting and wants to access the minutes after 7 days, they can make a request to the town clerk's office as well. If, they're concerned about any type of time lapse about it getting posted, or that, are having trouble locating it on the website. Although if you search, you should be able to find it, or typically it's under Agenda Center, or you can search for the commission by name, and then you can find the link to the Agenda Center there. So there are ways to access the minutes, after that 7-day period has passed. Even if, the time of posting it on the website, everybody's busy. We only just got back to full staff in the building yesterday. So
Thanks for that, MP. And Kristen, thank you for your work on the minutes. Okay, we're going to move on to director's report. This is an opportunity. We'll get Scott's prioritized departmental updates, a budget report, but it's a chance for us to also ask any questions about anything that's on his agenda that's presented, or anything that you have to ask. So Scott, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, no questions. Let's see. As far as this week goes, I have the Salt Meadow Pavilion restroom bid opening on Thursday at 2 o'clock, which is a Zoom meeting. Hopefully the bids will come in within reason, so we have enough funding. If not, I have to go back to the drawing board and
you have a few in already?
Excuse me?
You have a few in already?
Well, a lot of activity, but they haven't submitted. They're due on Thursday.
Interest, good.
So it's just whether building price has gone up from Cedar Forest products due to lumber price increases. So I'm just going to have to try to see where we land, and I may have to go back to the town to withdraw more CIP funds in order to get the project done. So that's taking place. As you know, we did get the steep grant for the Bower Walkway. I'm meeting with Mike Harkin on Thursday at 12 o'clock to walk the site so I can get a rendering and a concept and a plan, so I can go back to the state and say this is what the project scope will be. And that will end up activating DEEP, and we will be able to generate scope of work and conditions and go out to bid. That project now that it is state funded, is prevailing wage, where the pavilion is not, because that's municipally funded. Still have to work on West Wharf to get that set for the spring and to satisfy Deep with a CAM permit. I got to get all the players together to figure out if we can come to a solution with the dock and people gaining access to the dock and the transient boaters that are coming into town to try to give them access. So I have to pull that group together and come up with a game plan. Other than that, we've received quite a few job applications. We'll be going through those. We have quite a few returnees, which is great. But we have to start the interview process to get everybody set for the summer. But that's now everybody's back, with the exception of Linda. But we're all back in the office, regular schedule. We started, as MP indicated, town hall started back on Monday. We're still not open to the public except for by appointment. And we're receiving boat rack rental payments, senior softball, and soon we'll be receiving Bower Garden renewals. So, because those went out as well. That's it.
Any questions on departments or updates?
Scott, are you
Scott,
planning
when
on
do you expect to
hiring?
see?
Two at
Go ahead,
once.
MP, I apologize.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, MP.
Are you planning on hiring camp staff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Carrie's working on the camp staff.
Mhm.
We have several returning. I don't know how many openings she has. But she's got camp pretty much all planned. And so we'll be getting that out for registration shortly.
Great.
As well as Bower camps, sports camps. We're gearing up and starting to take registrations. So
I imagine a lot of people will be happy to hear that.
they're anxious,
Yeah,
real anxious.
yeah.
Scott, last spring, Rockland Preserve had a lot of traffic. We ended the season with Bruce mentioning, do we consider staffing up there? When do you expect, when does that pick up? Is that April or is it later?
As soon as all the snow is clear and the weather starts getting a little bit better, I would imagine guys we're gonna open the single track. The pump track needs to dry out before it really opens up. But I leave that to Jason and his group, Jason Engelhardt, who's on the Rockland Preserve Committee. They analyze and determine whether the trails should be open and the pump track.
Okay. And just finally, just based on the discussion that we had last time, does he communicate with the police commission as far as needs? Does the police do anything to direct traffic, or does that fall on us? I just know that parking on the street and it gets overcrowded on weekends.
Well, we have it posted where if the lot is full, there's alternate parking. He's not up there all the time, and not all the committee members are either, but it's the same thing with the beaches. They don't find a parking space in the parking lot, they flow out into the street. But we have parking up at Renee's Way, we have parking in Durham, and we have parking on Route 79. And to your point, I don't know if I can actually get a staff person up there. And what is the number up there? As far as parking, if there's no parking spaces, you're at capacity. There's no other parking. You're not supposed to park on the side streets, which are posted. We're trying our best with the neighbors to keep the people out of their neighborhoods. So
not to solve it here, but do you feel that we have what we need, or do you feel this requires further discussion offline?
well, we can discuss it offline. I know I'm looking at reorganizing the lot to increase the capacity with some diagonal parking. I have a parking concept. We just have to punch out to the west and to the east to widen it. But having everybody's going in right now for parking in the 90 degree, and the way we have it drawn up is there'll be a center line in the parking lot with parking to the right and to the left, and one way in, one way out around the circle. You'd head up towards the playground and then come back down towards Route 79. So we can increase parking that way because people will be on a diagonal. So it's easier to park, easier to get out, and it allows for more parking. So we're trying to do that. And we're trying to do that in-house, keeping it simple with a timber down the middle with lines, and being on Millings, we can probably paint it like probably once a month, like we do the surf club gravel lot, and they'll hold up. So it's worth a shot anyway. And if it goes again, then we're really gonna have to go back to the drawing board and maybe you have to make reservations or something to get into the trails or something. Like we were talking about the beaches, you buy a pre-ticket to get in.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about other departments or facilities? Okay. Anything on budget, Scott, you want to bring us up to date on?
The Board of Selectmen passed the budget as it was presented. There were very little changes, if any, and that's going on to, well, they have a public hearing on the budget, and then it goes to Board of Finance. So we'll see where we sit. As you know, we went for the 7-day coverage as additional budget requests for gate guards and lifeguards, but that was well received by the selectmen. So hopefully it'll stay in there.
Any questions from the commission? Okay. So with no other questions, we will go on to a discussion for old business. I'd entertain a motion, for review of the current state, and this would be seconded, and that would just get us into a discussion. And then, we would either continue the discussion or close it down. Pam and Vince have done quite a bit of work, and the plan in this discussion would be for Pam to kind of take us through and set up the discussion. So with that said, under old business, would like to move it into a discussion. We jump into it and set a time limit that we'll talk about it for an hour with to close the discussion with possible next steps, or we can make a motion just to have a discussion until we end the discussion. Is there a preference? Shane, Pam, MP? Everyone's looking forward to this discussion tonight.
I'm tired. So do we need just a motion to put it on the floor? Is that what you're asking for?
We're not making a motion to do anything with it, usually just have a discussion. So I don't know that we need a motion. I just think it was to set some parameters, but we can just say we're going to take, the next 60 minutes to have a discussion, and as guided by you, Pam. and the work that you've done.
I would hope it would not take 60 minutes, but I can certainly start the discussion if you like. With all my best intentions, I wanted to put together a more formal presentation, but just wasn't able to this week. And I do apologize. I always hate getting information at the last minute. So I'm sorry that I dumped all of this information last night. And I don't know how much time anyone got to spend with it. I've sort of been steeped in all this information, trying to come up with a way to have some kind of a framework or understanding of what we're trying to do. So I tried to come up with a certain number of goals that would be responsive to everything from pricing, hours. I think there's a lot of push for us to be very proactive, and I hope that Scott can help let us know what the department needs in terms of being prepared for high volume times, and especially when Hammonasset. I had not heard Peggy's presentation before tonight, so I didn't have that information. I didn't realize that it's very possible we'll be under COVID restrictions. I mean, I figured there would be COVID restrictions. I just wasn't sure what it was going to be at Hammonasset, or how the state was going to be handling this. I guess to be honest with you, I'm not sure where to start. And I guess I'd like to find out just if anybody, in reading through, did you have any reactions? Do you have any questions to the goals as they were laid out? Did you, I'll happily go through each topic for discussion. If you want to look at, I don't know how much you got to look at the Madison compared to other towns. There are a variety of ways that people handle their beach passes. There are a lot of differences in fees, in facilities, in hours. And I guess I'm just I'd like to get a sense from all of you where we go from here. I mean, I really kind of spent the last few weeks trying to put together information, and then with hoping that maybe you could help direct the research for the, in coming weeks, so that we'll have more information by our next meeting to try to make some concrete decisions about how we want to approach the 2021 beach season, especially in terms of non-residents. So did you have, what were your reactions going through the information or thinking about this issue?
So I guess a question that I would have is, and by the way, Pam, and I know Vince isn't here. I mean, I did get a chance to read through this today. This is certainly a great start, I think, for the commission to start having good conversations. The one piece that, and I'm focused on more of the email, and even in the starting point, so we've been asked to look at this and to review a recommendation for really the non-resident piece. What I don't know, or what I'm not clear on, is we have the objectives and we have our current policy, we have our current fees. And what I'm not clear on is, what is the Board of Select people asking us to, like, where are we missing the mark that they're looking for us to review this and then make potentially recommendations for changes to it? Is it we feel like we are too accommodating, we are too non-resident, we are overly, or we're not accommodating enough? The fees, the process, it's fine, but the fees are seem to be off. I don't know where to go with the conversation, because I don't know what,
Yeah.
I'm
It's a
not
great
sure
question.
I'm not sure what the target is. And I think that's the part that's not clear to me. So us just being asked to review it, unless they're telling us there's something's broken with it, you know, we can, and we've done this. I mean, I think for those who've been on the commission for years, I mean, this has been a topic of discussion that comes up pretty frequently, and we,
Yeah.
Well, I think
Shane, it's a
part of
great comment. I would, I think the last meeting or last two meetings when we talked about price, there was some good, healthy debate on when to do it, what it should be. There's a representative who is pushing forth a bill about beach access. So I think that's going to continue to be an issue. We have the Hammonasset issue. And, we could have this discussion tonight or over a couple of meetings and say, we're good with where we're at. We stand by our recommendation. We might in this discussion say there might be some things that we can do, just open to consideration. We may explore them and we may not be able to do them. We may explore them and find a way to do it, but we may not have the budget to do it. We may want to take a look at what Pam put together, what other towns are doing. There has been a request by the Board of Selectmen, do we need to just have a universal Town of Madison sticker? So I think everything's on the table. It's about asking us to say, what would our recommendation be? Leave things as they are, start a review process. So I hope that's kind of how it showed up, to me. I don't know, Pam or anyone else has any
but
comments.
Rob, so are we specifically talking about non-resident, or are we bringing resident back into this as well? I think because I know we had a discussion 2 meetings ago that, hey, we're going to pass on, we're going to punt on the any sort of fee increases at this point in time. Made total sense. We had a good discussion, debate about that. My understanding is this is specifically around how do we want to handle non-resident beachgoers going forward. And
I think that's a part of it. I think the other piece, other discussions have come up, which is, with the senior center merging and policy wise, what happens to the age that's recognized as seniors and what's the implication on that relative to beach passes? If we were to say every town resident gets a sticker and that gives them access to the beaches or the parks, and even the transfer station in Guilford is saying, do you guys have a sticker plan? So I do think, and even rates. So I do think it absolutely could be open to, do we have the right pricing? Do we make it easy for residents? Do we prioritize residents for parking spots? Do we, if you look at, some people continue to ask, the beach access is open to everyone, but you can also limit parking. Do we want to take that on and say parking should be limited at some beaches? Do we want to direct everyone to the surf club for non-resident because there's 550 spots there? So it's all on the table, I think.
So Rob, I think, so that last statement, so that I guess that's where I'm trying to get to is, so you list a lot of things there, and I think we could probably we could list out all of our policies for all, resident, non-resident, and go through one by one and, and say that, do we still believe this is valid? Or is there some bigger change we want to make, like giving all residents, for example, everyone who's paying taxes or whatever the criteria is, that they get a sticker and we just mail it to them. We could certainly take on that discussion, but I think as it relates to the non-resident piece, I think if the premise is that we need to do a better job as a town in protecting for parking spaces for residents, and whether it be on the weekends or in holidays, then that to me guides us down a certain discussion path, right? Because now we know that's a little bit of a direction and a charter that we've been given mission to say, we believe as a premise that we need to make sure we at the very least protect the rights of the taxpayers of Madison, that they have more access. So in looking through the list that Pam and Vince provided, clearly there's a lot of towns that have daily maximums for non-resident passes, right? So we could simply say, we're going to set a limit that we believe is reasonable. I don't know what it is, 10% of each parking, and say that's what our new, but that would be based on a premise an objective that says we're not doing a good enough job of protecting the parking spaces for town residents. And that's the part that I'm just missing. Again, I'm happy to have any of those discussions. I just don't want to make a recommendation back to the Board of Select people that says, well, that's not what we were really after. And
Yeah.
so.
Well, I think for one of the things that I realized in terms of just looking at pricing for Madison, I didn't just put pricing for the past year. I looked at 2018, 2019, and 2020. And I think that for Madison, we've kind of been all over the place in the past three years. And part of that is because we tried a new parking system in 2019 that didn't quite go as well as we had hoped. And then last year was affected by COVID. So I guess I do have questions about whether we have come to the right place. And we even had recommendations that were never implemented, like the $50, we had proposed daily fees of $50 during the week for weekdays and $75 on weekends and holidays. But to my knowledge, that was never implemented. So I guess, I think we probably need to look at our fee structure. Do we only want to do daily? Do we want to consider having season passes instead? Because there are towns like Guilford, for example, they do a season pass. They do not do daily passes for Jacobs Beach. And part of the reason that they do that, in an interview that I had with one of the staff at their beach and rec department, is because $70 discourages people who want to only come for the day. So that kind of helps solve that problem when Hammonasset closes down and people are just looking for a beach. But it also means that if people buy a season pass, then they have access, and about half of what they sell every year are non-resident season passes. So I think towns have different trade-offs, and I guess I'm just wanting to look at our policies. Are they right for us? And are there things that we haven't even considered? Like, for example, rentals. I think that's a really important thing for people who are here as either seasonal residents or renters, that there's some kind of we have a fee structure that would be appropriate for them. Do we want to keep our hours? I guess my thought was that this was an opportunity for us to sort of focus on the non-resident structures that we have now and really I think everything is up to question, because I don't feel like we've really settled on something over the past 3 years. That's just
and what may bubble up in this discussion, Shane and Pam, is just that. Like, what are the things that, Peggy has said, you guys need to look at it holistically. And it's not just about a fee schedule. We haven't updated pricing per se since 2007. Things that just came up there: rates, parking pass and process, resident, non-resident, hours, rentals. There's probably other things. I think what might be helpful is Austin and Scott. I know you guys were on a call with Peggy and Chief Drum. What are some of the things that Peggy has asked of you, Scott, or Austin from your perspective? And I think that may give some color as to, what the Board of Selectmen are thinking. For example, getting the data on where residents that are visitors, non-residents, come from. That there's a perception that maybe people that, can't come from New Haven or, an urban area, whereas other towns are saying we have Clinton shares with Killingworth. It might be that there are people from surrounding towns that are coming here. So we just need to know that before someone is trying to make a decision for the town that we could make possibly. So Austin, Scott, anything you'd want to add as you've been part of this process with Peggy and the Board of Selectmen?
Rob, can I just add one more question to Scott and
Sure.
Maybe a part B, because this goes to Pam's comment, which is a valid one. Scott or Austin, can you guys give us the current state of what the policy is right now? Like, I mean, Pam, you made the comment like we made decisions, but they weren't implemented. And then last year we ran into COVID. So maybe we can just refresh everyone, like if we were to go as is right now for this coming summer season, what does that look like?
Pre-COVID, it was, and prior to Complus, so you're talking 2018. The structure is Monday through Thursday. For non-residents, it's $25 per car.
I'm sorry, Scott, is this current state?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yep. So Monday through Thursday, $25 for non-residents. And then Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, it's 40 per car. Not 40. It shows 44 on the digital, but it's 40.
And Scott, it's no fee after 5 o'clock any day of the week for a non-resident?
Correct. And that was decided because it was impacting, if we stay after 5, it's impacting the concession at the beach.
All right. Another question for you. What's up?
Hey, Austin, I think that's you, bud, or someone, if you, I think it might be.
Okay.
The kids in the back.
So Scott, I have a question for you in terms of, I think one of the things that Peggy brought up to me is that it's really hard to try to be prepared for, I guess she was, what do I want to say? A lot of it surrounded the method of payment, that having people pay making it very easy to pay at the gate meant that we had to deal with whoever came to the kind of first come, first serve. And she was hoping that there would be a more planful way so that if people wanted to come to our beaches, they're more than welcome. But if there was some way that maybe they had to have their beach passes in advance, or do we want to try to put aside a certain percentage? And I guess I just wanted to get your sense of what is the capacity, and I want to say in a normal year, but we're not in a normal time, so I don't even know if this applies. But I guess that if you were going to set, from your experience, if you were going to say, okay, these amount of spaces or this percentage of our parking space should be set aside for non-residents, do you have any sense of where you would place that?
In a typical season, Pam, if you have the holiday weekend, that is the most chance we have of having to close the parking lot at Surf Club. Other than that, we typically have spaces available. People may have to walk from the exchange field parking lots, but they're walking from Lowry as well. But we closed that lot off last year. But we typically don't have, if we get to that problem, it's closed for maybe half an hour to an hour as people are leaving the beach, and people are coming in the evening.
Have you ever had problems in terms of, I know that we charge per car rather than per person or per family. Have there ever been problems with just simply having more bodies on the beach than what capacity would advise? Or
not in the past. Last year, yes, that we were counting the bodies on the beach, and that's why we had to close a few times.
Okay.
At East
I think
Wharf.
that was a big issue at East Wharf last year.
Yeah, East Wharf, West, and the Surf Club, because the sizes of the beach the tide came in, it was fine when it was mid to low tide, but then when the tide comes in, everybody has to keep on moving up, and that's when the spacing went bye-bye.
Do you anticipate having to make those same restrictions? Like, do you have any sense of how the percentage of people we're going to be restricted to?
I don't have a feeling for that. I don't know if those are going to be lifted or not.
What was it last year?
It was at every 15 feet, you had to have a space. So it was like a box, basically. You had to have a separation between.
But do you have any sense then what that translated into in terms
Into numbers, it all depends upon the tide.
of?
I mean, if it was a lake where the beach was stagnant and it was 100 by 50 feet wide, it continuously changes, and along with the moon. If it's a high tide, we lose the beach at the surf club and at East Wharf.
But then
They all shrink up.
But then how did you deal with that? Did you start just telling people they had to leave?
We had to stop people from coming onto the beach, and we pulled people back, saying, okay, we got to thin it out. You're going to have to move. Take a break.
So Scott, that brings up an interesting question. I was looking at the document that Pam and Vince put together.
Yep.
And some of them are really guided by capacity. And one thing that stood out was, buses, unless pre-approved, weren't allowed. I was looking up the beaches in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, and they have beach capacity, and they stopped bringing in. They have to use buses to bring people in. You park remotely, and they bus you in. Have we ever had? And COVID has prompted these discussions, but does the commission? And again, this is just a discussion. Do we work towards there's a capacity issue? So that if someone's having a wedding and everyone shows up on the beach, I mean,
weddings are after.
but
The weddings are after 5.
No.
Don't rent.
I'm talking about 50 people show up on the beach for the day. It's a busy day. Hammonasset's overflown. The lots are full, and then people walk down. I mean, they have access to the beach and they have a right to. And I'm being provocative here, but does the Beach and Rec Commission sit here and say there is a max to the beaches? I don't know what that is, but do we even consider having that discussion down the road?
Well, we've always gone to parking capacity, but with COVID, obviously last year we had to turn towards people. So we don't know if that's going to be lifted. In the past, people were blanket to blanket to blanket. Everybody was just trying to make room from themselves, and there was not as much spacing in between. If those regulations stay in effect, we're going to have to keep, again, this summer, we're going to have to keep an eye on capacity of the beach, which we have those numbers from last year, what we can handle with those restrictions. So those may open up a little bit, so we can allow more, but we're going to have to keep an eye on the beach capacity instead of parking. Does that answer your question?
But Scott, that beach capacity is a little bit around. You're just the department's sort of eyeballing that, right? Like you don't know how many people are actually on the beach. You're just
they were actually the guards were actually counting to figure out what the spacing was and how many they could handle. David was keeping a real close eye on it, and a lot of people didn't like it, but we had to do what we had to do.
So one of the things, and I guess this is a broader question for the group or something for us to think about, is, one of the struggles we've had in the past with making decisions and recommendations is, do we design our policies for the exceptions, or do we design our policies for, for lack of the rule, right? Like the normal process. And we understand we have exceptions, and, Pam, you brought up a great one. We have people coming in and renting for the season. How do we accommodate that? We've had exceptions around the nannies and babysitters and that piece. And but where do we start as a commission? Do we want to start with what's the base, and then we start getting into, and we start then tackling each of the exceptions? Obviously from Scott's perspective in the past, one of our biggest challenges, and one of the things that we've tried to, from a commission perspective, support them on, is enforcement, right? Like that's been a challenge, which is enforcement of our regulations, our policies. But I think we often get caught up in the trying to design a process or a policy around the exception and not the rule. And so, at least from my perspective, I think if we start with the rule and what is the general rule we want to follow, that is a policy that makes sense, and then build off of that and how to address the exceptions. Because again, like even Scott, as you mentioned, as it relates to counting the beach, like that, the lifeguards counting beachgoers they were doing that on their own. I mean, I don't know how we sort of operationalize that unless you start counting people coming through the, at the gate, and then we start controlling that, which is, it's not just the car, so I think we just, again, we can spin ourselves into, and every time we get narrower down a path, we start creating more exceptions and more. So, I think just something for this group to consider as we go forward is, where do we want to really start the conversation? And, my perspective is, if we can start with what is the sort of the standard process look like, and then work off of that to design the exceptions or address the exceptions, might be a better approach.
And Shane, that's exactly the goal of the discussion, which is just to surface that. So if we're going to focus on standard processes, when we go down the list and say capacity is not something we're going to tackle, or when I'm going to use the term proactive, Pam brought up the ability to sell passes in advance. Scott was mentioning, do you require people to purchase a visitor's pass in advance, so at least we know what the attendance is? Or do you require them to do what other towns do, which is buy a season? And like, do we want to, as a standard process, talk about being proactive? I think rates are on the table.
I have some thoughts about requiring non-residents to purchase passes in advance. The building closes at noon on Fridays as uniform policy. So in my opinion, it's an undue burden to say somebody's coming from East Haven, they're planning on coming for the weekend, they have to come on like a Wednesday or Thursday between 8:30 and 4:30 to come purchase a pass, and then come all the way back to use the beach on the weekend. So I think that can be construed as an undue burden. Maybe if unless we're instituting some sort of online purchase system again, and that's a whole nother ball of wax. But if you want to encourage some sort of pre-purchase, maybe offer a slight discount, but I don't think you can eliminate offering non-resident passes at the gate.
Yeah, and Scott had brought that up about how do we do it? How do we do that remotely and online? And it's a valid point. And MP, the other thing that came out is, if you buy a pass and you can't make it, or it rains,
Yeah.
or you show up and you can't get in. So there's going to be a lot of limitations. But to Shane's point, one of the things the department needs and the town would like is to understand what the demand will be. And that's why we're looking at, and we don't have that yet.
I don't have the other sheet of numbers in front of me right now, but pulling the numbers that were in the Register article that Pam cited in her report, which I assume are probably 2 years ago, out of 5,700 passes, 180 were non-residents. So that's like 3% non-resident sales. So, you know, it's also possible, like last year was unusual because of COVID and Hammonasset restrictions and everything, but it's possible we're overthinking a problem that's not a gigantic problem percentage wise. And the fact is that our residents are the most frequent users of our beaches. And, you know, by far, if it's only 3% non-residents.
Mhm.
So we may
Great
be
point, MP.
complicating a small issue in normal times.
Okay.
If we get to normal.
Right, well, right.
MP, I think your point is quite valid, because a part of it is also educating not just the community, but the state, you know, and making sure people understand that Madison is open and welcoming and we've got the facilities. The reality is it's 3% or less.
Yeah.
And it's not a cost issue, or is it? Pam, did you have a comment?
Well, as I was thinking through this, that particular question, a few things came to mind. One is, well, like some towns, we could set aside a certain number of passes every day or parking spaces for each day that would go to non-residents. But once those were used up, then we would turn non-residents away. I don't know. I mean, that's one way of doing it. I'm not saying that I'm in favor of that, but I'm kind of throwing it out there as one way to make some sort of a limit to try to balance the needs of residents versus non-residents. And then the other thing, and MP, you touched on this, would it be possible to have some sort of an online purchase where they could purchase that for that day, print it out, and then present it at the gate as they came in, so that it wouldn't necessitate them coming to the office during normal business hours, but they would be able, but it would be a simple process. And I just don't know where our capabilities are at this point, because I know that even our ability to do online sales is still evolving. So I'm not quite sure where we're at with that, but I guess I'm putting it out there as is this some place where we would even want to go? And I just don't know how other members of the commission feel about it. So I guess I was just kind of throwing a lot of different things out there just to try to get a sense of where we are as a group. Like, do we all think that these rates are what they should be? Are we all comfortable with the current rates? It sounds like we're pretty clear about the hours, but do we want to have any kind of restrictions? I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing it out there for discussion. And Scott, if you have any thoughts about how we can try to be more planful around high volume moments, and I don't know how exactly you predict those. If you have any words of wisdom, please share.
Could be.
It all depends upon the day.
Yeah.
If it's a gorgeous day, people are going to the beach.
Yeah, okay. So there's really no pattern, it's just the weather.
Yep. Except for like Memorial Day, it's typically a high day, July 4th, obviously, that full weekend. Labor Day is typically low. But the other days, or if it's a beautiful weekend that's forecasted, people plan on coming to the beach.
And my understanding is that in this coming season, we will not be able to do there will be no executive order COVID restrictions. We won't be able to say residents only on weekends like happened last summer.
Well, the governor's executive order, I believe, expires in April,
Right.
and we don't know if he's going to extend it or not. We have our doubts whether it will happen or not, but we have to wait to find out. Right, Austin?
I like the idea that as a percentage that there's some number of spots that are kept open or season passes that are sold to non-residents. I think that would be, I think, an option for us to discuss at some point. Like, is that the best way to manage, make it accessible, make it fair? The surf clubs, Scott, I don't know if that, I'm thinking 550 spots. If there are 4 people in each car, you're going to have over 2,000 people. How often have we had to turn people away from the surf club for a beach day? Not
Not a lot.
Not until this year
Because
because of the COVID restrictions.
a lot of people go down there to picnic. They don't necessarily go down to go onto the beach. Or they're going down and they're going out on their kayaks or sailboats or catamarans. It's not everybody is going to sit on the beach. They're utilizing the grounds. The basketball courts, the horseshoes, the bocce, strong field. Just
Right, which is
to be out
another
in the
point.
public.
It's a multi-use park too. It's not just the beach.
Right.
The one saving grace about, the beach season, it dies, the sports die down quite a bit prior to the end of school. We do have a summer baseball, with Little League, but it's not overwhelmingly all the fields going at the same time. So, it's controllable, but, we want to know who's coming in. That's where our issue is with having the athletic fields down there, is because we have a pass system in place and people are coming down, and Shane will attest to it that we've tried to work it out with sports passes so we know who's coming in. They're supposed to stay for the game and they're given a certain time to be out of the park, but then controlling that is monumental.
I think to that point about, that's the sports teams, the variability. A lot of what we're talking about when Shane says, the standard process, the bulk of this is really weekends and holidays. I think during the week, maybe independent of COVID, demand isn't the same issue where we run into traffic issues and volume. So do we need to think about relative to standard process? Do we need to have plan B for weekends and holidays on how we operate?
I can look into with RecTrack, trying to figure out limited tickets. I could go into a ticket system and have a limited number of tickets available per day that could be purchased online, and they'd show the receipt. Yes, they were able to get a ticket, and then we'd give them the day pass. It wouldn't be any money or credit card or check given at the gate. So it would be a matter of them showing the receipt. We'd write down the plate number, the date, and they're into the park. And we only have X number. And the deal with all 3 beaches is any non-resident or resident that doesn't have a pass and they want to buy a daily pass, they have to go to the surf club first before they go to East, and then they can go to East and West if they choose. They can go out, they can go shopping, come back in again. That pass is good for the day.
So I think that rate, and maybe this is a question that we can answer tonight. Setting aside surf club, do we? And I understand I'm talking about parking, not beach, beach access, but for East Wharf and West Wharf, do we want to allow non-resident parking at those? And we're
I think we're pretty full with just the resident use.
Correct. So I mean, I guess my point would be is if we're selling day passes for non-residents, do we want to just agree now that one of our recommendations to the commission would be is we would recommend that parking passes are only
Surf
available for are only reserved for the surf club. That there is no parking pass. Because I mean, when we heard complaints last year, we hear more complaints about East Wharf and West Wharf than we do about the surf club. And it's just, I mean, just look at the numbers. It's 550 compared to whatever, 70, and it's even less than that. So I think,
Shane, I think it's a great point because it doesn't, you can still walk to West Wharf, East Wharf, or ride your bike, or if, let's just go crazy and say we had a shuttle service, which it's got a whole host of other issues, cost and liability, but it's probably the best place to direct people to park. We have the space, we have the facilities, and they can go to any beach they want.
well, and what we saw last year too was people pulling up with their cars. And we did see this, people pulling up their cars, dropping off their families, those families walking into East Wharf. Then, one of the parents driving downtown, finding a parking space downtown. And then that person, because it's a half a mile, just walking back to that beach. And at the end of the day, and that's why I think in a lot of cases, that's why we saw some of these beaches, like East Wharf in particular, that were packed.
Yep.
Do we
What-
walk-in rate?
What was the last time we ran that suggestion past the town attorney? I thought we had done that last year or the year before about whether or not we are legally allowed to do that.
Scott, I believe Peggy is
Not-
looking into that based on the meeting that took place. Austin,
Yes.
do you recall that? I
Yeah,
think she's looking
she's
into
supposed
that.
to be looking into that with our attorney, yes.
Okay.
But I think what we were seeing already is, and again, maybe, and Peter, your point, maybe they're in violation based on the information that Pam provided. There's already a bunch of towns that are restricting. They're not restricting access to the beach. They're restricting access to parking, and they're only allocating that parking to certain beaches. So either, now again, I think the legislation, as I understand it, in the policies was around beach access, not around parking access. So, and so we wouldn't be restricting beach access to anyone. We would just be saying the parking spaces are for those beaches are town residents only.
Agreed.
So, I mean, I guess what I would say is from a group perspective, going under the assumption that we would be not be in violation of any state laws or regulations. Does this group agree that might be at least a recommendation that we'd want to make to?
I would support that, we reserve X parking at the surf club for the reasons we stated, 2 sets of bathrooms, fields, parks, cooking, everything, and complete access to all of our beaches. But that's just the parking. That could be something I could get behind.
Would we ever want to have walk-in rates?
I think that's where we come into problems, Pam. That's where the problem started in Greenwich.
Oh,
I think the other piece too there is you'd have to check everyone coming through, and you've got, I mean, how many kids are riding their bikes in and out of the surf club and those parks every day? It's got to be
Many points of access.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I remember we used to go to a lake when I was a kid, and we would get stickers on our hands. It was individuals, and you get a sticker on your hand for the day. But yeah, okay. So we don't want to go there. So we really want to just keep this focused on the parking then.
Yep. If we had a
Pam, I
fence
think
all
it's
the
a
way,
great,
if we had a fence all the way around Surf Club, it might be feasible, but
Okay.
no, Pam, I like that idea. I know in New Jersey, the beaches do it that way. I think to Shane's point, a standard process, what's the simplest process? Staffing would be a challenge, managing that would be a challenge. But I hear where you're going. I mean,
Again, it's just a question.
yeah, sure. Yep.
Do we want to, so I'm sort of keeping notes of things that we wanted more information about. I think one of those would be, would we be able to legally restrict non-resident parking to a certain number of spaces and have that only at the surf club? If we did that, would we have to provide transportation to the other beaches so that they had access? Or, I mean, I think that's a whole question that we need to look into. But another question that I have for the group is, what about rental fees or renter fees? And the only town was Old Saybrook, and they, what did they do? They have rates for seasonal renters were $20 for 2 weeks with a 4-week maximum. And I guess I'm wondering, I don't really know that much about Madison's rental market, but if anybody has any ideas about what the typical renter is it weekly here? Is it monthly? Or do people just have their summer homes that they come to? And, how do those people, or how do we accommodate those people?
well,
So Pam, if I could, we're coming up on 45 minutes. I think this is a discussion in itself. I mean, I think we need to just, we really need to discuss. There's a lot of discussion in town on additional properties, new properties, people coming in, and there is a way to get daily passes. I agree that I think we need to figure out, to Shane's point, is there a standard process around renters? So Scott?
I think we kind of have that in our hotel motel policy already, where they pay $10 a day for somebody that's a guest at their lodge to go to the beach.
Scott, I think we would just have to expand that with the expansion of like Airbnb. I think you mentioned that before, Rob, and then VRBO.
Right, but it would be $10 a day because they're Madison guests.
That makes total. I agree. I think when we set that up before, I'm not sure we were in the world of.
No, we weren't. But you could
I could rent out my house and just say, hey, I'm going to move out for the month of
Yep.
July and August because I can get a lot of money for my house. I'm making this up, and
Right.
suddenly I'm asking for buying all those passes too. We just have to. I think we just have to adjust our policy around that and make sure we're clear on it.
Right.
But I agree.
It could be like I have somebody asking, they're renting a cottage for 3 weeks. So if you bear it down, you do weekly passes. So it's $70. They're here for 3 weeks, $70 a week. We write down the dates on the daily pass and their plate number. And so we have the valid date listed on the tag. So when they come through the gate, we know it's a valid, it's paid for, and if it's expired, they have to turn around.
So this is our current policy, but I was all over the website and I did not see this. How do people know?
Well, this is that's how we handle the hotels and motels. We have in our policy, we have you right now, renters have to be here for the entire season in order to get a seasonal pass.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Otherwise, they have to come down. If they go to the beach, they were paying a daily fee, and it was the non-resident fee during the week.
I think this is
This would
something
be
we should
paring it
probably
down to
consider
10.
digging into. I know that we don't want to make rules based on exceptions or hypotheticals, but imagine there's a new development of 9 residents off of Route 1, and let's say no one lives there for the summer and they're rented out weekly or for the summer, and or it's a turnover. I think we need to dig in and say, as beach and recreation in the town of Madison, how do we want to be open and inviting? And then to your point, Scott, how do we document it's their vehicle, that they're in town? I'm not familiar with the policy, so I'll have to read up on that, but I would ask that we come back and kind of
Sure.
dig into what is the current state. As we start to wrap up this discussion tonight, I do think we need to talk about rates, and even in the context of some towns have the tax office just issue them based on registered vehicles. Is that something that we should entertain? Are there implications to that? Is that a no-go zone? But even fees, Austin brought us up to speed that, age 62 versus age 65. And we probably need to have a discussion on that. I don't know if people feel, Vince is another call and he was pretty adamant on price and
But
cost.
we're right now we're 60 years. And what we were talking about, if we're going to 65, we were going to be grandfathering anybody that had reached age 60 for this summer. And next summer, if we're changing our rates, it would be the senior rate would become effective when they're 65.
And so this is a material impact in the volume
Correct.
seniors that purchase. And there's political impact too, right? People are never happy with price increases, as Vince has made us aware of. So
Correct.
we probably need to discuss that a little bit more in depth and rule out other alternatives or rule in. When the public comes to us and says, how'd you make these decisions? We can at least say that, these are a series of discussions that we've had based on data. So to Shane's point, standard process, there's rentals, there's parking and overflow parking that we carve out. There's price. Are there other items, MP or Pam, Austin, Scott, or Shane, that you think are, big rocks, big items that we need to look at other than what was listed?
I think for me it's just making our policies clear, because right now, and maybe this was because of COVID last year and the landscape was changing so rapidly that there wasn't any way to sort of formalize what the policies are. But I'm learning things tonight that I was not clear about before. And I guess it would just be nice to have all of this information consolidated in one place so people can really understand what their options are for coming to our beaches.
Another category is communication. It's okay to take a look at our current state and is there a way to improve on it? So right now I got communication, reserve non-resident spots. How do we address rental properties, rates, anything else? Shane, MP, Scott, Austin, that you think are big rocks that we need to tackle?
Well, again, there's a million exceptions. We talk about that we've got to add in the sports teams, assuming we just at least to revisit and make sure there's whatever, because what ends up happening is we change some other policy or process. We've got to make sure that we accommodate how does that impact the downstream decisions? So, maybe one thing that we can do, Rob, is to sort of, which I think is what you're leading to, which is, can we kind of go down a pecking order of, like for example, we made this, we at least assuming that we're not restricted by law, to say we're only going to offer day parking passes at surf club. Like, can we go down sort of a pecking order of decisions And then we can come back as a group and sort of let's tackle each one of those and at least get a consensus or a thought process and get something down that we can as a starting point, because I think that will end up flushing out, and where we have sticking points where we're stuck, either we have disagreement or whatever, that's where we can start to have further discussion. But if we kind of walk through that, let's decide on this factor. Like, again, parking is only going to be at Surf Club. Maybe the next question with that is, okay, if we're only doing parking at Surf Club, are we going to restrict the number of day passes that are available at the Surf Club? Non-resident day passes. The answer is yes. Okay, then the decision would be probably want to turn to Scott and Austin and go, what would you recommend? Is it 10%? So 55 parking passes would be available for day pass. Is it 5%? Is it 20%? What's reasonable amount that would be? We get to that number, then it's okay, then how do they go about buying them? Do they, MP made the point that it's not fair to require someone to show up in the office on basically like by noon on a Friday to buy a pass for a Sunday, so how do we, the answer might be no, we've got to allow day of purchases. Okay, so is that online or is it in like at the beach?
Right.
And so we can kind of walk through that process of making those decisions. And I think we'd get to a pretty good place pretty quick, at least a recommendation. And then once you have the policy, the fees are, that's almost that's almost like a last discussion that we can have, which is, okay, now what do we want to charge for that? And that's something that we can, because that's not going to change. That's probably not going to change our policy. That's just going to be for the procedure. It's just a data point.
We just have to keep in mind when we're talking about the non-resident passes, there are a lot of, on the weekends, there's a lot of Madison people that are bringing families in their different cars, and they're buying a daily pass as well.
Right.
So there's added cars on top of the Madison residents. So
one of the things
when
that
we
asked for
create
was
that, when we create that number, we just have to bear that in mind. And we have
and that's some of
we
the
have
data
the data
we
of
have,
how
Scott?
many
Okay.
how many non-residents were sold on a Saturday and Madison guest passes were sold on a Saturday. So we can analyze that to come up with a fair number. Follow me, Shane?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you,
And
Shane.
that's, and Scott, and that's the nuance. That's the stuff that, that's why we need you to keep us honest, because there's obviously nuances that you're going to know.
Yep.
Yeah. Shane, thank you for that. I think that's, you've pointed us in a good direction in terms of kind of tackling this in a systematic way. So thank you.
So we're up on an hour. Time flies when you're having fun. Before MP, any comments or questions? We're a little quiet. I think you brought up an excellent point. A couple, 2 points tonight. Anything in addition you want us to take away from this?
Not really. I just want to point out that I think we started on this conversation because of Vince's concerns about the rates for the senior passes, and that's not included on this list. So we need to remember that that was a concern that we started with, I believe.
Okay. So here's what I have. And Pam, I know you're taking notes. I have one is just overall communication. It includes everything, current state and how could we improve on it. 2 is non-resident spots, which is everything that Shane just kind of outlined and articulated. 3 is rental properties. If anything, we'll review the current state and we'll just have some discussion. And then MP, next would be, rates or any changes. And this, let's evaluate that with the work that Vince and Pam did, and let's put some data behind our current state and if we're going to stick with it or what our recommendations would be. The final piece that I added here is how do we sell? Maybe this falls under communication. Scott has done a great job of getting up to speed on the town site. came up tonight, if we're going to sell visitor passes, do we try and do that in advance or allow that in advance online? So I would just say categorize how we sell. And then, what we can do is we'll capture these points. We'll get them out to everyone outside of the minutes. If you have feedback on order of priority, that'll help drive our agenda. I think it's important for this group to kind of determine where you guys want to start and put the most effort. Okay. If there's no other comments, we've hit 1 hour on this. So great job and really appreciate the discussion. Nice job, Pam. Thank you very much. Moving on to our agenda, there is no other old business. The new business we have is from Madison Little League. We'll entertain a motion to approve a donation from Madison Little League. Once that is seconded, Scott will take us through what that actual donation is and his position on it, any work that's been done to date. And we'll have some discussion and then vote on whether or not we would accept the donation. So is there a motion?
I just have a question. So our decision to accept a donation, then it still needs to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, correct?
Yes.
That is
Yes.
correct,
Right.
yes.
And Board of Finance.
So is there a motion on the floor to accept the donation from Madison Little League to Beach and Recreation?
I'll make the motion to accept the donation from Madison Little League.
I'll second.
Is there a second? Okay. So we're in discussion now. We'll ask Scott to present what actually has been the process and you open it up to any questions the group has. Scott?
Sure. I was approached by Matt Anderson, the president of Little League, and they would like to donate the funding, and they're arranging for the work to install first and third baseline fencing on JC Auxiliary to mirror what is on JC Main. This is in order to protect the players from going into the lower guardrail because they don't necessarily stop when they're looking for a fly ball when they see everything coming at them, where a 4-foot fence stops them. And it also keeps the spectators away from being on the field and away from foul balls coming from the home plate. But this would be down first and third, similar to JC Main. And we did not do it in the renovation project because the renovation project was completely for JC Main, where we did the tiering, new backstop, new baseball, new outfield fence, etc. I think it's 2 years now. So I think it's a good move. It'll help protect spectators and parents, or spectators and players, and keep everybody in line. Because we saw chairs creeping up so people could see, and this will keep them in check.
So this is no cost and no work to you?
No, well, trimming work.
Yeah, okay.
Basically, but we would eventually get to it to do this fencing, but they want to instill some of their capital money to help improve the field that they use a lot. So.
And how's that with the sight line with adjacent houses?
It's going to be black. It's not going to be obtrusive. It'll stop some dog walking a little bit, I guess, but.
Good news.
Is this a seasonal fence, Scott, that comes down, or what's
No, it's a permanent fencing.
And did the residents that live nearby have issues with this fencing that was put up at JC Main?
Nope, we haven't had a peep since the renovation. And we take things down so the banners aren't up, and that was the biggest thing. They were okay with the fencing. It was when they had the championship banners and everything on the fencing for the entire year. They wanted them down at the end of the season. And we've accomplished that, so.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Hi.
Shane and P. Pam, aye. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Scott. Nice work with that. And thank you to Madison Baseball. At
Madison
this
Little League.
time, Madison Little League. Oh, thanks for that. Just have it. I don't think there's any other public comments. Anyone have any other comments? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a
Second.
second?